We are on, Nathan.
Love it.
Thank you so much for coming.
Glad to be.
Give it to me, bro.
Yeah.
I promise you that I'll tell you how we met, and it's funny.
Okay.
Before COVID,
Okay.
when I still worked had that company called Invisible Heroes, we decided
Right.
to look for places to meet clients.
Yes.
So we looked at co-working spaces, meeting rooms,
Okay.
and we used to have meetings, tons of meetings at Bohan.
Okay. Yeah.
And you were one of the guys, and I saw you. And you look like Chris Pratt.
Ah!
That was the first thing I
Yes.
told you. You were
Okay.
you had a kick out of it, and I
Yep.
can still see it.
Yep.
Little pieces of Chris Pratt.
I always, whenever I get the Chris Pratt, well, I used to wear a beard, right?
Uh-huh.
And when I got rid of the stubble beard, and when I got rid of that, I got less of Chris Pratt. And then the funny thing is that when I was drinking, I had more of a bloat to my face, and I got more of Chris Pratt then. So I lost the stubble beard, and then my face is thinned out because I'm sober now, and it's less. I get less of that.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a point where I was getting Chris probably daily.
Really?
People were like,
how did you feel about that?
It just was funny. It was funny, but then I also made the joke of no one's referencing sexiest man of the year, Chris Pratt. It's all Parks and Rec.
Really?
Chris Pratt. And I was like, I think I understand where that's coming from. And I said, I'm going to lose some weight.
Well, actually, now, have you seen Chris Pratt in Jurassic Park?
Mm-hmm.
I would say you remind me of more of that Chris Pratt.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah.
He looked pretty good in that one.
That is funny.
Well, that's great. Yeah.
When you arrived, you were telling me your history on coffee, and I was like, wow, you have family members who own coffee shops and things like that. I'm like, wow, and I'm getting a little nervous making coffee.
Oh, no. Yeah.
2 books here, like I told you, it has different methods of making coffee.
Well, yeah, I mean, coffee for me I worked at, my first job when I was 15 years old was at a coffee shop. It was the Campus Coffee Bean in Flagstaff, Arizona. Uh-huh. And I was the dishwasher.
Flagstaff?
Yeah, Flagstaff's home. And so I was the dishwasher. My dad, he's always been big into coffee. He played golf with the owner. And I turned 15, and he was like, "Hey, can my son have a job?" So on Saturdays, I washed dishes, and the place was busy enough that literally for 6 hours it was out, get the dishes, back, wash them, and I was like, "When am I going to learn about coffee?" And they were like, "You're not. You're the dishwasher, and you're 15."
Did you ever actually learn how to make coffee?
So I did a little bit there. There actually was a friend that became a good friend of mine named Seth, who was a drummer and ended up in a band called Telescope that did some pretty cool stuff. They had a good run. Great drummer who was the barista there and taught me a little bit at the end. But then I quit that job to start a punk band, which is just pretty classic. And my first high school punk band. But then my dad and my oldest brother went on to open a coffee shop that's called White Dove Coffee, also in Flagstaff, Arizona. And White Dove actually just won Best of Flagstaff this last year.
Nice.
They've been there, probably 15, 20 years, something like that. And then that same brother moved to Denver and started a coffee shop called Drip that's right in downtown Denver. And lots of people know that place if they've been through Denver or whatever. So, but for me, I ended up at Starbucks. That same oldest brother worked at Starbucks before he started White Dove, and I worked at Starbucks, and I always navigated Starbucks in an interesting way. This was pre, this was 20 years ago, 21 years ago. I was a senior in high school and I didn't have morning classes my senior year. And so I said, hey, I'll open before I go to school. And the manager was like, I don't know if I'm allowed to let you do that, but like come in like 15 minutes after open, and I think I can. And so as a teenager, so I became the opener at Starbucks, and then that was an ace up my sleeve. For the next 10 years, I was off and on at Starbucks. And when I moved to Nashville, I got a job at the Starbucks in Cool Springs. Because what I would do is I would go to the manager and I would say, hey, I know that the rules for Starbucks are that you have to have open availability where you get scheduled all across the board. I said, I can't do that, but I can open the store Monday through Thursday every single day, which they always have a hard time getting openers. So I said, I'll open Monday through Thursday, but I need weekends off so that I could tour. And they would go for that. And they were like, I don't know if I could even do that. Well, I was like, well, I've already learned the system on how to do the scheduling, and I can show you how to custom edit the schedule. And they were like, will you be like an assistant manager? I was like, no, I'm in a rock band. Like, I won't. I want to be a barista and work here. And so I did that. And then I worked at Red Bicycle Coffee in Germantown, and it's one of my favorite stories. I did the same thing. I said, I'll open the shop Monday through Thursday, and they were like, well, you have to learn how to make the crepes as well.
I love crepes.
And I said, I'm not going to do that. I'll make the coffee. And there were two owners, and one of the owners is still a friend, and I think the other owner is not a part of it anymore. But Dave is the owner of the Red Bicycles in town, and Dave was a good friend. The other owner was like, this is, after like 6 months or a year, the other owner was like, this isn't fair. You have to learn how to do the crepes, and I think you're just scared that you won't be good at it. Oh. And I went, come on. I'm not scared that I won't be good at it. I just don't want to work in a kitchen. I love coffee. I want to make coffee. I like being able to talk to the customers while I'm making their coffee, and I make better tips, and I make the kitchen better tips because we split the tips with the person, because I'm personable and I know how to get tips, from people. And she goes, nope, you have to do the kitchen shift. And I went to Dave and I said, hey man, by the way, I'm starting a new artist development business, so I'm not going to work here anymore. But don't tell her, because I'm going to go learn to make these crepes, and then I'm going to quit. And he was like, that'll be funny. So I said, it's not that I don't know how to do it. It's that I don't want to. And if you make me, I will quit. And she was like, no, you won't. You're just scared. So I did one shift. I learned how to make the crepes, and I was slinging out crepes faster than anybody else in that kitchen. And then at the end of that shift, I said, I quit. And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah. And so it's funny. It's kind of a mic drop moment, but then at the same time, like I like telling that story, but I also don't want to seem like I was leaving somebody in the lurch. So the other owner did know that was happening. That's my coffee journey, man.
That's funny.
Coffee's been an important part of my whole journey in life. So yeah.
I was once doing my taxes long time ago, and then I'm like, holy crap, I spent so much money on coffee this year. Yeah, I better back off and buy something. I could have bought like 2 machines or something. And then I got really into it because there's a Goodwill next to my dad in Clarksville that had a lot of good stuff, because it was right next to like military installation. Yeah. And then they just put like mocha pot stuff like that, and like Starbucks like pod machine. I bought like 3 of those, fixed them up, gave them away, and stuff like that. And I got more into it, bought these books, and start learning different ways. I'm like, that is so cool. I've experienced these. I thought it was like, I don't know, I thought everybody kind of had this, but finally, like, I knew that I had ADHD because I was diagnosed as a child, but I never really understood it.
Right.
Because I think there's multiple stages of that. I guess until I met my wife to be my fiance, because she's in the field of advocacy, neurodiversity, I honestly did not really put too much effort and thought. I learned what kind of works for me, but I didn't have the words to understand and like to describe it. You know, I had to. It's weird because I had to have some kind of structure, but I also had to have some kind of freedom.
Yeah.
But I realized that if somebody tells me that I need to do something, most likely then don't want to do it because I'm told it's like what they call the pathological demand avoidance. Something like that. Have you experienced like that?
I experienced that. I think more of where I struggle with it is in the space of if somebody tells me how to do something. If somebody gives me an objective, they say, hey, I need you to accomplish this thing. I'm like, let's go. And I love leadership. I love being led. It's a break for my brain. If somebody's going to lead, and if they lead competently, I love the opportunity to follow. But where I struggle is when they say, I need you to do this way. I go, that way doesn't make sense for me. And I used to have an ego about it and go, that's not the right way. I used to be like, that's not the best way.
How did you deal with that?
I'm in the learning stage of this right now, where I'm really having to untether that my way is not right for anyone other than me. Right? My way is right for me, and I can feel confident in saying, hey, I would love to participate in this, and I think I can help us achieve this objective, but for me to be a part of it, I'm going to need to be able to function this way. And so some healthy boundaries, or I think they're healthy, of saying like, if I have to adapt to your system, this might not go well. And I just need to be upfront about that and okay with that. And hopefully my collaborators are okay with that. But I'm doing a better job of not, and then in my coaching or in my educating people on process, I'm getting better at saying like, hey, this is how I view it, how I see it, and how I think about it. And a lot of people, because a lot of creatives are neurodivergent, they go, that makes sense to me. And I've never heard it that way. And so more, instead of being like, this is the right way to do things, I'm saying this is a way to do things. And then what I'm really good at is being able to say really articulating the objective of a thing, where we want to end up. And sometimes that gets me in trouble because sometimes I get too far down the road of where we want to end up. And I need to be more present in what we need to be doing right now. And that's maybe more where I get a little bit like, if somebody says, go do this thing, they're probably a little more tapped into like the immediacy of like, because with the neurodivergence, I can outline a process, and I'm learning that I'm not very good at the priorities of the things in that process. I can say, this is the order of everything, how it needs to happen. I can kind of puzzle it out. But I'm learning that all of those things kind of come in at everything's top priority. And I'm starting to get I'm reaching out for help of like, hey, here's the 10 things we need to do. And I'm going to let somebody else determine which one goes first because I'm finding out that I put everything at 100% priority, and that's not actually true. So I think the conflict that I have is when somebody says this thing's priority, they're saying, I need you to do this thing. And my kickback is that I go, but what about these other 9 things that are also priority? and I need to come down in the ego and submit to neurotypical perspectives to say like, they might actually be right, that this is the priority, and it might not ever make sense to my brain as to why, but that's a goal, if that makes sense. And
it does,
long-winded answer to your question, but like I think the kickback comes from not somebody telling me what to do, but just not being able to actually process the priority of a thing. And I'm trying to get better at like trusting people, but then you have to have people that you do trust, and so when it's somebody that is asserting themselves in a power over dynamic, like trying to assert over the top of me, no, but I'm trying to find the right people to have power with, where I'm saying, hey, I'm giving you the authority and the power to run this part of things, because I'll do it poorly. If that makes sense.
Things you were talking about hit home with me.
Okay.
What I've learned recently, it's all of this is a process, you know, trial and error. Is systems are really important, and the right systems can lead you to the desired outcome, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And this reminds me, so I used to have that other company that I worked with, that was my company, and there were 3 music producers with 3 different ways of doing it, which is difficult.
Yes.
Because music is such it's a non-existing thing, and what good is, it's really depends.
Yeah.
So and we had countless of arguments because somebody didn't like this and I liked it, and it was very difficult, and ultimately, unfortunately, didn't work out because it just did it.
Yeah.
And there was so much that I've learned in that process.
So much, yeah.
And it's crazy because sometimes people, failure, but sometimes the biggest learning is in those things. And
Real quick on that, sorry to interject.
No worries.
On failure, I've been working to reframe failure into finishing. Right, in that, and I understand fail fast as a concept for entrepreneurship, but I stepped away from my company that I was full-time in for 10 years back in 2023, and then having stepped away from the band that I was in for almost 10 years as well, I really needed to do some work on what failure looked like, because the goals weren't met that I had set. But yet the activities and the things that we did, we had big successes along the way, and a lot of successes that weren't intentional, we didn't mean to do. And so, but they were awesome. And so I started to go, okay, I had some goals. I still have those goals, but the vehicle that I was using to try and get to those goals just ran out of gas, and it just finished its part of the journey, and so I love that picture of like, we just ran out of gas there, so we can go try and find some gas and fill it back up, or we can find a new vehicle. And so in 2023 I'm tired of going and finding gas and putting it back into the same vehicle. I think I'm going to go find a different vehicle. And so that's on failure. I think that's something I've been spending a lot of time with. So, you know what I mean? And and then I launched a company last year that absolutely failed. And then I went, fail fast is great. Cause it was like a 3-month burn, and we launched, and the launch just was so underwhelming, and I'm actually really glad that it was underwhelming to the extent that it was, because it was like, this didn't get me far enough to even go fill this thing back up with gas. Like, I'm gonna move on from this one quickly. So
that's a very important mindset, I think. I try to look for achievable goals that gives me like, okay, keep going. And the thing was is that none of us had other jobs, just that we were trying to put 100% into it.
Yep.
But the problem is each individual person, three of us again, we had to make income for three people.
Yep.
And when it comes to that, and you're like, oh, and sorry, I forget to mention that three people, three different needs, three different income level needs, and we were making probably enough maybe for one person. So we were relying, and that's where it comes like, oh, but there's so much potential. Potential is nothing. How do I say it? Like, there's so many ideas in the world, so many potential, but are there actionable motions?
Yeah.
Can it be scaled up? And what are the elements that you should look for to, that was it. Like, we tried everything.
Absolutely. I think what you said about needs is an under talked about thing in entrepreneurship and creativity. Is that, and I posted a Instagram video, a reel today, really about this, that I spent most of my life creating big picture plans that had point A to point B to point C, and the big payoff was point C, and point B was always things completely outside of my control. And for my needs to be met and for the needs of the people around me to be met, we had to make it to point C. But point B was completely outside of my control. And in my sobriety journey, the Serenity Prayer, has been a big part of it, of, give me the courage to change the things that I can. And realizing so much of this middle process of goal setting were things that I couldn't change. And so then the wisdom to accept the things that I cannot change. And so I started to come to this place of like, if something's going to be considered a success, point A needs to fulfill the needs of everyone involved. Because if it doesn't, then you don't have the longevity to wait until point B can happen organically. And so then you're always trying to force it. And if you're trying to, like, you can't force a dance party, right? Like, you can put the music on, you can get everybody there and have the disco ball. But unless somebody's feeling it, there ain't going to be no dance party. My brother used to say that all the time, the coffee brother. Used to say that all the time, and he actually does a lot of music and percussion and stuff like that. And he does, and he like DJs now, like super like out there stuff. It's really cool. So you can't force a dance party, man. Like, you can't force that scale, to use the business terms, right? Like, you can't force a scale. But I'm with you, man. I get it.
It was an interesting journey because there were points. I think I reached a point where my love to music production was gone. Not because I didn't like it, but I didn't get the fulfillment because I felt there was an abuse because of the lack of right communication of the needs of the person.
Yeah.
And I love everything that I do. Like, I put so much love, and care, and of course you have to be able to put aside, like, if somebody says, "Oh, I don't like you," that's not you, but then again, still, like, you put care in all the stuff. So we had this one artist who I was super excited about everything. I put, like, literally, if I were to tell you how much money we get per hour, it's like cents. And by the time, you're really just doing this to honestly please the person and also to make sure they have nothing bad to talk about. But then when they abuse it, like, they call it the wrong time, they use very bad words and yell and things like that. I got to a point where I just didn't like music production, and I needed. Weird to say, like, I didn't really talk that deep open about it, but I felt like I just didn't want to do it. Like, I woke up and I had this weird gut feeling with that creation,
Yeah.
even though I loved it. Like I had my reasons. I had to get back to my basic thoughts of why do I do this? What is my goal? And all these
Yeah.
things. And I needed time and needed something else to kind of fall back love into it.
Yeah.
And to kind of try to detach and heal that. Which is weird because they say, oh, the client is always right and things like that. But I challenge that thought because what if the client just doesn't know enough to be able to tell you their needs?
Sure.
I mean, I don't know, and I could be wrong.
Well,
welcome to tell me your thoughts.
Well, in the Creative Act, Rick Rubin's book, he says that a true collaboration doesn't require compromise. And that hit me like a ton of bricks because I have had to compromise things that were very important to me in all of the collaborations that I've been a part of. And it was because there was a power dynamic that the other person in the collaboration had something that I was lacking. And I needed them to fulfill my vision. And that could be anything from money to a skill set that I didn't have. And we talked a little bit before the episode of being a jack of all trades, as they would call it. And what I realized was that other people had the ability to value the thing that they had more than I had the ability to value what I had. And I had the drive, and I had more drive, not that other people didn't, but I had more drive and more motivation to reach a point. And I had more of a vision. I had, a picture of what I wanted to see happen. And my collaborators would have something, they would get excited about the vision, but then they would have something that they wanted different in that vision in order for them to participate. And so then I had to compromise. And in Rick Rubin's book, he talks about it. And when I say book, I definitely mean the audio book, because as a neurodivergent, I do not.
I cannot read. I can read. I can read.
I can read words, but
attention.
I can,
I feel you.
But,
I'm with you.
and also listening to Rick Rubin, it's just like butter.
What's the name of the book?
It's called The Creative Act. Yeah,
Creative
Act, and it's,
I'm gonna have
really
to listen
great.
to it.
And he says a true collaboration means that when you reach a point that somebody would have to compromise, you haven't found the best idea. Which means you have to go back to the drawing board until the person who would have compromised is, and this, I remember listening to this, and I have a 6-year-old daughter, and in the world that we live in, we're talking about consent now, right? Like her whole life, we're talking about consent and understanding what consent means, and thinking about enthusiastic participation. And I think about the fact that, like, and what Rick Rubin says, and this is a weird connection to make, but if the person is not excited, if everybody's not excited about the idea, you haven't found the best idea. And so if somebody has to compromise, if they're not coming into it with enthusiastic participation, something's off in the collaboration, in the connection, in the relationship. And so I've never valued myself enough to say, I don't like that idea. That's not what I want to do. What it means is losing a collaborator and letting that be okay, and saying, if we can't come to the point where we're both excited, then maybe we've reached the end of this as a healthy collaboration, and letting that be all right, and not contentious, not necessarily contentious. I think that's the only way to like move on and like stay chill, and like be cool is to not force compromise. And so that's what I'm seeking in my creative world right now, is like, if we hit a point where we're both, if I have to convince you of something, I'm out. Like, not in like a drop it, but just like, I'm not going to convince you of something.
Yeah, like it shouldn't be negotiated.
I'm going to tell you what I think, and then I'm going to, and I worked on a project with an artist. We wrote 10 songs. They're all awesome, and I think they're going to go into the world this year, and I'm super excited about it. But we were going to collaborate past the songs and work on the releases together and work on the brand and the marketing. And I put forward what my idea was, and it wasn't met with enthusiasm, and so immediately I just went, that's okay. You know, like, you guys go, you do it, because I'm not going to convince you, but I also don't have any other ideas. This is the idea that I think is right for this. And so if I were to be a part of it moving forward, I would be compromising what I think the best idea is. So
I'd like to comment to that.
Yeah, you got to jump in with me, because you got me caffeinated. So I'll just keep going.
Well, it's called Caffeinated Creatives.
Yeah.
I completely relate to that, because when I'm excited about an idea or I get something, I do spend a lot of time thinking about, it could be this, and we could go this way, we could do this. And if I go and present the idea with like enthusiasm, it's not met with that, or I get pointers.
Yeah.
And then I feel like if I get like, I know when it's not met with that, then I start to wean off of it, and I don't really want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
I am a very people person. I love meeting people. I love, like, this sort of thing I love it. Like, it's very intimate. I listen to podcasts, and I actually wanted to learn how to be a good, not interviewer, but more conversationalist. You know, how to ask interesting questions, revealing questions that reveal personality.
Yeah.
Anyways, I had this idea like years ago hey, what if we create this? And then that enthusiasm wasn't met. But and what I learned that I gotta have my own thing. I gotta keep on doing it without other things interfering with that excitement, because something will come out of it if I put the right energy in it.
Yeah.
You know, I had something I was gonna share. Shoot.
It will make it back.
Oh Lord. Oh yes, I guess the riding the excitement, which I thought everybody kind of had like that way of thinking, but I think it's more like an ADHD thing or something, because I do have cycles of getting into things. And if my memory serves me, did you talk about cryptocurrency?
This sweatshirt is Gary V's V Friends, which I got into, and I own a VF1, which is like the launch of it. And at one point, the thing was worth $60,000. Could have sold for. Worth is interesting, right?
Yeah.
It could have sold for, and my wife was like, "So are we gonna do that?" And I was like, "No," like, because some other ones of these projects are like selling for like millions. Woo! And not of this project, but of other ones. And so I was like, I'm hanging on, and then the whole thing crashed, and it's still, if I were to sell it, I would still profit from being a part of it. But I love this sweatshirt. I love the characters that he's doing. This is the Loyal Lobster. And I love Web3 and what it could do. And I'm not big into crypto, but into Web3 and NFTs. But I also love that it was something that was exciting and then crashed. And it can have a second act, but maybe it won't. And isn't that so much of life? You know, it's like, we're excited about this right now. There's so much creatives. We're excited about this right now. Oh, everyone's over it. will it come back? Who knows? But yeah,
it was interesting. The reason why I brought it up because that years ago I had a whole like cycle of that, learning about it. We wake up at 5 a.m. You listen to YouTubers talk about how to learn, like predicting. And I'm like, shit. For like a half a year, and I'm like, yeah. And then the whole thing crashed. I'm like, shit.
The artist that I'll mention by name, because I am very excited about the project. But I was working with her name's Ainsley Costello.
Okay.
And Ainsley Costello and her family, the Costello family, are launching a new. I guess it's a business. I don't want to speak to it in detail because I'm still learning about it. But they've found a way to engage Bitcoin collectors and the Bitcoin blockchain in regards to funding master recordings and generating revenue for creatives through Bitcoin. And so Ainsley and I wrote about 10 songs together. We did a project with Nick Wheeler, who's guitar All-American Rejects, and great producer here in town in Nashville, beautiful studio in East Nashville. And so Nick and I wrote a song with Ainsley that I believe is coming out this year, and it will be its launch will be going into the blockchain through Bitcoin, and it's very curious. And they were, and that's where it was like, I had some vision for still non-traditional approach to the release of the song, and then they were kind of getting these opportunities, and I'm excited about it, but I'm not enthusiastic to that level. But now it's really great because now it's exciting for me to see them excited and cheer them on, but wasn't something that I felt I should be a driving force behind. And I think when you make those decisions and you say that earlier, it allows, like, we're still talking a lot, and I'm excited about what they're doing, and that's beautiful, and that's really cool, rather than losing a relationship because you're forcing or pushing people to like compromise and stuff. So yeah.
I remember you mentioned you have a noon meeting or something. I don't want you to be late for it.
Yeah.
We have like probably 5-10 minutes possibly.
Love it.
So just
time flies.
I feel like we could talk for a long time. I love it. I love it. That's my favorite type of conversation.
You get me caffeinated, I can get going. So, and you as well.
Oh yeah, I guess I'm used to it now. Caffeine runs in my bloodstream now.
Yeah, always.
Are you a comic book fan? Marvel, DC?
I'm films. Yeah,
films?
I'm into the films. I watch. I think I've seen most comic book films that come out. Most of the shows. Yeah.
What type of films do you like?
Man, I'm a film junkie, I would say. I love storytelling. I'd love to find a path into film at some point in my creative journey. I'm working on a book that is inspired by Cameron Crowe's Almost Famous, in that is a fictional autobiography of his life. And I've had some pretty interesting experiences in my life. There's nothing to warrant a memoir from me in regards to an audience, but I feel like a fictional retelling of my experiences would be a fun, entertaining book, and so I'm working on that, and would love to see that head towards a screen adaptation if at some point.
Awesome.
More of a passion project for me at this point, but yeah, and I love all kinds of film. I find myself drawn to action, and as a neurodivergent, I need high stimulation. So a drama needs to have pretty intense emotional storytelling that's really hitting on the feels, for me to be pulled in. But I'm excited for Godzilla X Kong. You know, just
I have an
like
interesting
big
question for you.
visuals and stuff. Yeah, hit me.
How did you learn things?
Oh,
What was your way of learning?
Doing.
Yeah.
I can't.
You mentioned earlier about like because you were listening to what's his name's book?
Rick Rubin's
The
Creative Act. Yeah.
And you were saying like I'm like that too. Like I cannot sit still.
Yeah.
But I can listen to anything.
Yeah, I learned by watching.
Same.
And absorbing, kind of like pulling everything in, and back to some process. If you tell me the objective, I will learn the path. And so, you know, I didn't know I was ADHD until I was 36 years old.
Really?
And I mean, we assumed, but I started getting treatment, and because my symptoms got to a point where I really needed support in my family life. Having a young child, my symptoms were causing problems. And then I realized how much those symptoms had caused issues all throughout my life.
It is interesting, isn't it? How it changes.
Yeah, and so how I learned was by watching, absorbing, and then reverse engineering an objective for myself. Because if somebody said, this is how you do something, it wouldn't really work. But if somebody said, this is what you're doing, and this is why you do these things, then I could reverse engineer the pieces of it. But it's all up in here. I'm not very good technically with many things. And so, you know, and this could be a whole nother conversation, but AI has actually brought a lot of value to me in that, as far as a craft, I've not fine-tuned a ton of craft. I've stayed very creative, visual, and process-oriented. And so AI has brought a lot of value to me in that it helps me accomplish and do the things. And there's some conflict around that. There's some, you know, people have some issues with that. But for me, it's been a big value add in my creative process.
AI, if it's used for the right reasons, is gonna be good. But I think, like, being a creator, a lot of the lower tier services might not be there because that will take over. Because I did a bunch of writing for music libraries and things like that, and I've read like months ago that a certain website who sells like what is it, production music, allowed AI to study it. And we already have stuff like that, and now you know, like when you produce a song, you give like stems. Now there are sites, and I've used it. I have a very funny story, and we have to possibly do a part two another time. I'd love to. I mean, I want to learn more about.
Well, let me say this, and maybe it's a good place to wrap.
Okay.
Is that as a lot of this comes down to your view of humanity, and this goes a little philosophical, but I believe that humanity is innately good, and I believe that we're born creators, and we are meant to create, and all of the bad, all of the controversy comes from a lot of what we've been talking about, in where creative vision and passion conflict, and we force collaboration. And what happens when we force somebody to come out of themselves? We force trauma, and we force hurt, and then we have retaliation. And this creative thing can be, whatever was created can then be weaponized because of the hurt. And I think as creators, I think we're obligated, and we're all creators, but the people who are leaning into that creative journey, I think it's about going, how can I move through life creating things that bring benefit, and how can I eliminate the harm of the things that I create, and anybody using AI, anybody in these places have to be very thoughtful of that. But that doesn't mean that these tools that come can't be used for good. And so we all have a responsibility to look at the places where things are causing harm, try to address them, and support the people around us. Because yes, people are going to lose jobs, and they are losing jobs, and there's going to be fallout. But as creatives, we can support each other, and we can help each other, and turn something that's a good tool towards something good. But I mean, really, I think that comes down to this creative process of starting to respect the collaborative act of saying that maybe the best collaboration is somewhere else, and trying to reduce harm and trauma and hurt by pushing people to create in a way that's not innate to them. You know what I mean?
Thank you so much.
Oh man,
thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Quick,
Yeah.
Where can people find you? What are you excited about? What do you want people to know about you?
Yeah. So Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Nathan J. Dohse. Dohse is Dohse. And right now I'm pursuing collaboration. And I want to help people do the things that they want to do, where I can bring the most value in my fullest self. And yeah, so I love talking with people about projects that they're working on and see where I can bring some value. And
I love
Instagram's probably the best place to
I love it. That's how I like to describe what I do.
I love it, man.
I'll tell
Thanks
people
for having me.
if it's something that makes sense. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Thank you so much.
All right.
I
Thank
appreciate
you for having me.
And that was it, everybody. Nate. Nate, my mate.
Yeah, there you go.